Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So these guys are a little bit later out than I was expecting, but between the move and some stuff with work and getting settled in and things like that, I wasn't able to get these videos done as quickly as I would have liked, but we're doing them now. So we're going to be doing guides on the Monk, Paladin, and Hunter classes, because those are the three classes that I expect to be playing the majority of this patch, focusing most on Monk as my main. And today we're going to be talking about Mistweaver Monk, which is the main spec that I'm playing in this patch for my new guild, Live Laugh Lobotomy, in raid, as I am a Mistweaver raid healer for now. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about everything that we need to get you started with the spec in patch 10.2. Now, if you're looking for more advanced concepts, or if you're a very experienced Mistweaver player, you're probably not going to get a ton out of this video, though I appreciate you clicking on it either way. I will recommend that you go check out a creator like Megasett, who is a fantastic Mistweaver and has taught me quite a bit about the spec, not only from her videos, but hanging out in her Discord, the Mega Settlement. Definitely go check her out if you need to. I'll link her channel in the description below. So what we're going to talk about in this video, well, we're going to talk about everything that you need in terms of talents. We're going to talk about your basic healing priorities, your stats, your consumables, your enchantments and things like that, of course, as well. And then we'll also touch on things like crafted gear and which embellishments you should be chasing, and just generally the playstyle of Mistweaver Monk for this patch. Now, you can see I got my Mistweaver Monk here. I'm not the most geared, as you can see. I'm still rocking Rain Song from Vortex Pinnacle from last season, but I did just recently get 4-piece, and we'll talk about the tier set a little bit as well. So that's what we're going to do in today's videos. We're going to kind of touch on everything that you're going to need to get yourself started. So let's go ahead and jump right into the talent builds. We're going to start with the Mythic Plus build because it's what I'm in. So the Mythic Plus build doesn't really change a lot from what you were playing in patch 10.1 and in season 2, where you're playing the Mythic Plus sort of Phalanx Stomp, Ancient Concordance, Awakened Phalanx build with Shielin's Gift and Chi Ji. Ancient Teachings as well. So this build really revolves around these kind of three major concepts of Chi Ji, Ancient Teachings, and Phalanx Stomp. Small changes in the class tree is that we do now add a point into Bounce Back, which did get changed from Mistweaver only, to where when you take more than a certain percentage of your health in a single hit, you get a big damage reduction for 6 seconds. Not enough points to spare to put 2 of them in here unless you want to lose the point and save them all, which I generally don't think is worth it. Because you're sacrificing a pretty decent HPS threshold for a minor defensive benefit to get a slightly bigger damage reduction for 6 seconds. It's not big. Some things to point out about this particular build and some points that could potentially be moved around. The points that could potentially be moved around, Strength of Spirit could potentially see its way into something else, such as, maybe Escape from Reality if you want to try to get a little bit more mobility. A little bit of mana savings when you Transcendence. I haven't found a lot of big use for this at this moment in time, but I'm also still kind of figuring out everything about the dungeons themselves and where I can still utilize a lot of the techniques that we can get. And as the season goes on and as we learn more and more things, we'll definitely pick that up. You could also throw a point into Grace of the Crane, potentially to increase all of the healing that you take by 4%. So there's definitely some room there for you to be able to gain some passive, just spend a little less mana on yourself, but basically Expel Harm is a better version of Grace of the Crane in the class tree. Other than that, you do take your triple defenses of Diffuse Magic, Dampen Harm, and Fortifying Brew, even though Fort Brew is kind of crap. Even with this talent reducing it to a 4-minute cooldown, it's still a very, very long cooldown for not a lot of benefit. But again, not really any other better points to take. Improved Roll, Tiger Tail Sweep, and Elusive Mists don't really do a lot comparatively speaking, and the passive benefit of Fortifying Brew is going to end up being better in the situations that you need it. And we don't take any capstones here. Summon Jade Serpent Statue is only good for a more Soothing Mist oriented build, which there is a raid build that's set up for that way. But as this is not a Soothing Mist oriented build, no reason to take it. And there's just not enough points to get things like Resonant Fist and White Tiger Statue, and Black Ox Statue is not going to necessarily do you a lot of good as a Mistweaver. So the tree itself doesn't really change a lot. You take whatever damage increases you get. You take your big utility and Paralysis, Spear and Strike. You take Celerity. You grab Fast Feet for Rising Sun kick damage and Spinning Crane kick damage. So you just do everything you can to maximize your damage and utility output. The big thing in the tree is you're taking a lot of the ancient teaching synergies. So you're grabbing things like teachings of the monastery. You're grabbing, of course, ancient teachings of the monastery. Secret infusion is still in this build, which you'll use basically almost always on either the occasional essence font, but mostly on the renewing mist. I've used it occasionally on an enveloping mist because I run with a blood DK a lot, who doesn't necessarily have always have bone shields on pull, and so having both hots up and getting them up instantly when he gets trucked is a good way to kind of do that. And of course that boosts your crit. That's a really niche case with just blood DK. With almost any other tank, you're going to always want to use it to gain the haste bonuses, so renewing mists or essence font. Phalanx Stomp is in this build, so of course you do want to try to encourage your tank to keep it inside the Phalanx Stomp, or you stand in the Phalanx Stomp as much as possible, so you can take advantage of the fact that you get the more AoE blackout kick, as well as getting the healing from a Rican spinning crane kick. Now you're not going to use this as a main source of healing. Renewing Mist into Vivify Cleave is still going to be a big portion of your healing, but it does allow you to do things like that are small little ticks of damage, where there might be just like a melee hit or two that gets taken, or there might be a pulse AoE that goes out every couple of seconds. This is a good way to cover for that, but it's not going to cover like big damage events. Chi and Yulan. So Chi is going to be used for this because it also removes movement and parent effects. So on like entangling weeks, when you're getting an entangled right before you go to use a Chi, you can save it to cast Tiger's Lust and do Chi. But Chi also does work because it has a little bit of that damage to healing conversion through the way that it functions. Now there's a whole video that you could make on how to use these Celestials, and in fact Megasett has done that. So I definitely recommend checking out that video. It's a great video on how to use Chi and Yulan in their appropriate settings, and it just goes into much better detail with a much cleaner explanation of what the rotation is going to look like. Because if I try going into that into this video, it's just going to make this video way too long, and a lot of you will tune out, I'm sure. So I'm not going to go into that today, but I will recommend strongly Megasett's video on how to use your Celestial. She did update it for 10.2, so it is excellent. Some other things to keep in mind here with Zen Pulse and Echoing Reverberation is basically that if you use this on a target that has, like on your tank, then you can take advantage of having the second pulse. So you always want to try to cast Zen Pulse onto your tank. Otherwise it defaults by triggering around you. So this is something that you can set a mouse over for, so that you can, you know, if you're going to go in, you can quickly like get an enveloping mist onto your tank and then Zen Pulse off the tank. And you're going to find yourself being in a pretty good spot with doing a little bit of extra damage, because you're going to get those double pulses, which means more damage on all the enemies that are surrounding the tank. Okay. So the basics of this build are that you're going to want to spread your Renewing Mist onto as many targets as possible. Keep Phalanx Stomp down as much as humanly possible, because it's also your main trigger for Ancient Teachings, which does allow you to, you know, get that sort of conversion of damage into healing. So it's a good way to, again, to be like a good source of consistent HPS output. And then you have your good burst windows through Chi and Revival, and then your Vivify Cleave as well. So overall, this build doesn't really change a ton, but it does a lot of really cool things that are really unique. Biggest thing about it is that you just have to be able to, you know, figure out how to maintain Phalanx Stomp. Now, the good thing about the Phalanx Stomp buff is that even if you're outside of the Phalanx Stomp, because you have to move for a mechanic, it does have, I think it's just through the baseline Phalanx Stomp. If you step out of it, you do have the buff for a little bit of time, so that makes it a really good, useful talent. The other thing I want to point out is Life Cocoon. So Life Cocoon actually got a really nice buff. The baseline buff does, you know, 645,000, you know, absorbing 645,000 damage, and increasing hot times over by 50% over time. So 645,000 damage, you can see, is almost my entire health pool at 465 item level. But with the talent of Mists of Life, you get those two hots, so you're going to get the immediate benefit from that 50% plus reduction, and you're going to get a 45-second reduction on Life Cocoon, making it about a 1.3 minute cooldown, so minute 15 seconds or so, which means that you have a pretty good tank cooldown. And with the buff to the Absorb Shield, it is actually a legitimate cooldown now to use to save a teammate or to save your tank. All right, let's talk about raid builds now. So in raid builds, there's two of them here. There's a more Clouded Focus raid build, which is, I think, is a safe pick to be your default raid build. It does pretty well on every single fight, although there are some fights where I think there's another raid build that could be better, but this is a very safe pick. Biggest difference is obviously that you drop bounce back in order to pick up Jade Serpent Statue, and that's because you do use a little bit more of Soothing Mist synergies in this build, so having Jade Serpent Statue out there just to be a big increase to your HPS is going to be quite valuable. So the class trees, you can see that's really the only change is that you pick up the Jade Serpent Statue and you throw 2 points into Grace of the Crane in this build. Other than that, because you're not taking these 3 here, which saves you the 3 points that you put here, here, and here. And so as a result, the other thing that you could do as well is Ring of Peace could potentially be moved out somewhere because you have talents here that connect to your defenses. So you can take a point out of Ring of Peace. There are certain fights where Ring of Peace is good. Laradar, I'm looking at it strictly from the heroic perspective because that's where I'm at right now in my raid progression. Laradar, you can use it to bounce the trees into your group if you need to help cleave it down. Farrak, it's pretty decent on. But on a decent majority of fights, you can just pull the point out and probably throw it into bounce back so that you're getting that extra. Or you can put it over here into Ferocity of Zwen so that the little bit of Rising Sun kick damage that you do is a little bit stronger. So I think either way, you can throw it into either of those points and you're going to find yourself in a good position. So what are the major synergies in the spec tree with this build? Well, it's going to revolve a lot around Clouded Focus, using Invoke Yu'lon with Invoker's Delight, as well as Rising Mist. And then you're going to get a lot of work with Xiaohao's Lessons. So the basic kind of overview of this build is that you're going to spend less time necessarily trying to do strict like damage to healing conversion, and you're going to do this is like a much more effective like spot healing, spread renewing mist out to as many targets as possible. And then you have a couple of ramp windows that you can do with this build where you're going to have mini ramps with things like Upwelling, where you can essence font with Thunder Focus T to get a short duration but large amount of essence font hot time on it. And then what you'll do on top of that is you have these mini ramps where you can do essence font into some strong vivify cleave, and then you'll have big ramp windows with Invoke Yu'lon and taking advantage of the Clouded Focus effect. So it has a lot of like ramp periods where you can do this really, really high HPS for a certain amount of for these big damage event windows. And some fights it lines up really, really well for it. I actually think Farrak, at least as I've played it on normal, I think this build is really good on Farrak because you can actually use a Yu'lon ramp to basically solo heal the ads that you have to heal during that fight. But at the same time, I think that this build does do good if there's like consistent 1 minute damage windows. So you really have to learn the fights. Something like Ygira, I think there's some it gets some pretty good value out of it. And then also, of course, like I said, Farrak, I think it's a very good build as well. And then you get a build, and then but on certain fights like Nimue or to a lesser extent Smolderon of Volcaros, I don't know if it's as effective. I think the other raid build might be better. It's a lot of playing and testing. That said, this build I think is generally good in every fight in the raid. I think you can absolutely use it on every fight and you're going to have no problems, and you're going to put out good HPS numbers as long as you're hitting the playstyle correctly. The other build that you can do in raid is an Ancient Teachings based build that still uses Invoke Yu'lon. And so you lose the Jade Serpent statue, so again you come pick up bounce back, you take 2 points out of Grace of the Crane and put it into Ferocity of Zwen so that you get the extra damage. And this build focuses around using Feline Stomp in combination with Essence Font as your Ancient Teachings activator, but then you still get your good ramp windows in Invoke Yu'lon, where you can have your big ramp windows every minute with Gift of the Celestials, which is really the only pick you're going to play in a raid situation. With both builds, you also will take effect of Xiaohao's Lessons. So this time, every time you cast Shielan's Gift, you basically get one of these lessons that basically enhances your kit. You're not going to necessarily play around these all that often. It's just something that when you run out of one buff, you want to be able to cast Shielan's Gift and take advantage of the next buff. Now in this build, Shielan's Gift is only going to heal 2 people. Or 3 people rather, instead of all 5. So it's because you're not taking Legacy of Wisdom. And it is a little bit of a longer cast, so you do have to be mindful of it. But with Xiaohao's Lessons, you get these little buffs and damage with Lesson of Doubt, giving you, more healing and damage. Lesson of Despair gives you bigger, more crit when you're above 50% health. Lesson of fear decreases your damage and increases your haste. And then lesson of anger is basically you duplicate your healing. So all of these are really good for both damage and healing throughput. There's not any of them that are bad, and you can't target them. They cycle through automatically. So you just want to cast Sheelan's Gift. Basically, as soon as you lose one of these cooldowns, you want to go ahead and start casting Sheelan's for the next one, just because these all give you some decent level of amp to your healing and to your damage. Now this build, you do obviously see Yulan, but you also take in Font of Life, because you do actually use quite a bit of Essence Font upwelling here to maintain, because you're not getting the more consistent resets because you don't take a Wiccan Phalanx in this build. So sometimes you'll mostly use Phalanx Stomp to reset your Ancient Teachings buff, but occasionally you might need to Thunder Focus into upwelling. Now with Secret Infusion, same thing. You always want to use it with, and you'll always get the benefit of the Secret Infusion haste buff, but you sometimes can use it on Renewing Mist as well, just so that you kind of maintain these uses of keeping up the haste buff as much as humanly possible. And then with Rising Mist, you want to be able to Rising Sun Kick on cooldown. So you're getting, this is a little bit more of a consistent healing profile. It's less bursty, but it is a little bit more consistent, but it does require that higher uptime on the boss. So you do have to take into consideration your positioning. And there are certain boss fights where this is not necessarily going to be the best build. I think Nimue, this build is probably a little bit iffy. And I think on Farak, this build is probably a little bit iffy. But it also kind of entirely depends on your strategy. So these are the builds that we're going to look at. I think these are the three that you want to look at. I can link in the description the export codes for all of these that I'm using right now. I think right now I use Clouded Focus a little bit more in Raid, but I've been messing around with this Ancient Teachings Yulan build in Raid, and I like the playstyle a little bit better. I just got to figure out how to. I still like learning the playstyle and how to more effectively intermix the damage and healing profiles for it. All right, so let's talk about your healing priority. So we're going to go into the spellbook for this. So with the healing priority, there's a few different things that you want to be thinking about. So first and foremost, you want to keep Renewing Mist on cooldown. Like, as you can see here in this, I have Luxos's Weak Aura package. There's plenty of other ways to track your charges, whether you use something like this, like a Weak Aura, or you put it on your bars where you can see the number of charges that you have. But you always want to keep at minimum one, generally speaking, both charges of Renewing Mist on cooldown, just because it activates so many other things in your kit. So it activates your Vivify Cleave. It actually activates your new tier set as well with Chi Harmony. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So it just activates a ton of stuff in your kit. So Renewing Mist is out as much as humanly possible. Vivify is going to be your main source of healing for the most part, as it does did get buffs, so it's a better single target heal. And then all allies with Renewing Mist receive basically 30,000 of that, and then even more than that. So you can have, depending on how lucky you get with your Renewing Mist spread, I've had as many as 8 out at a time. So 5 of those targets are getting 30,000, and then I think the other 3 were getting something like 20, 22, or 23,000, something like that. So you can get some pretty big spread healing. It's not like extreme burst cleave, but it does have really strong burst cleave potential. Other things to consider: Soothing Mist in both builds does have some potential if you know a target is going to be taking sustained single target damage. So if there's a target that you know is low, it doesn't have a defensive or something like that. I think, if, for example, like Aegir or Spears, if you have a target that's like, hey, or I have like 5 hunters in my team, so for the most part, and they're all Beast Mastery mostly. So, they necessarily don't always have a defensive up if they get targeted twice in a row, so I can Soothing Mist channel into them and make sure that I keep them sustained when they take that big hit from the initial spears. It's also good for tanks. If there's a tank that's taking a big hit, you Soothing Mist into them and get the the Enveloping Mist instant cast and then Vivify. And then of course you're going to use Soothing Mist a lot in the Clouded Focus build because it enables your big ramps. But for the most part, in Ancient Teachings build, you use this basically as an emergency pump into one target. Beyond that, it's a lot about maintaining your 2 hots as much as humanly possible. Enveloping Mist you use really when you are just wanting to either do a Yulan ramp, or you have like a single target that's going to take a lot of damage, because you just basically, the healing itself is good on it, but you really want that increased healing received. And then of course with your Celestials, they're always going to get this Enveloping Mist, as well as let me grab, there it is. You're going to get the Soothing Breath, or enveloping breath, which I think is the GG version. So like there's a lot of different ways to do it. Essence font in Ancient Teachings builds, you aren't going to use it a ton. In Mythic Plus, you don't really want to use this unless you have to heal on the fly. But in raid builds, you'll use it as a good way to activate Ancient Teachings for the Ancient Teachings build. And in a Clouded Focus build, you generally want to use it before you summon your Celestial, so that you can get it because of the double mastery. It says here, like you see in the middle paragraph, Gust of Mist will heal affected targets twice, and Gust of Mist, our mastery, basically means that they get a chance to get extra healing on top of what you get already. And so when you enveloping mist, or when you essence font targets and then pop out the Celestial, they're guaranteed to get some bonus from this passive. So it just means that that ramp window is even more powerful. But the basic core healing priority for a Mystery Reaver Monk is Renewing Mists on cooldown, Rising Sun Kick on cooldown, because with Rising Mist you're extending those hot durations, and then you want to Vivify Cleave as much as humanly possible, using things like Essence Font, Renewing Mist, Feline Stomp, even Chi Burst, which I have talented here, as basically ways that you can do healing on the move or do a little bit of damage and healing. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do for it. But really the core of it is Renewing Mist. As you can see, I'm just gonna use both on me, and then use the healing. Stuff like this, you can see I'm not thunder focusing it. You can see how long that channel is. So it's just, you go through, and that's kind of the basics of what you want to do. So stats. So from a stat perspective, Mystery Reaver Monk has kind of been somewhat the same for most of the expansion, in that generally speaking, you're going to value haste the most. As you can see, I've got quite a bit of it. I have quite a bit of crit and burst too, because I still mix in Brewmaster gear and Windwalker gear, where crit verse is a little bit more valuable. But haste is definitely going to be your highest priority stat that you can get. You want pretty much almost, typically you want to get around to 25 to 30% if you can, and then after that, crit becomes the most valuable for that. Verse can be equal depending on how much you have of each. Like both of these are at a point where I probably could do with, if I get a haste verse piece, I'm probably going to get just as much throughput as what is a haste crit piece. And then mastery is something that you don't necessarily want to go out of your way to get, but if it's a good piece that has like haste mastery on it, then you want to take advantage of that. For example, this Trinket Smoldering Seedling does give mastery as part of its effect. That's fine. I've got things like this crit Band of Twisted Bark. It was like a 30 item level upgrade, even though it's crit mastery, which are not the most ideal of stats. But it was enough of an upgrade that it was a healing throughput. So I don't mind that I'm getting almost 11.5% mastery off this one item alone. So stats, haste crit, verse, also pretty good. Like the way that I look at it is that if you're choosing between like a haste verse and a haste mastery piece, you're generally going to be better taking the haste verse piece. If you're choosing between like haste mastery and crit mastery, probably better taking the haste mastery. And then if it's like haste mastery or crit verse, probably better taking the haste mastery, just because haste is that much so valuable on that, because it obviously means faster cast times, faster hot ticks. It means a reduction in cooldown on things like Rising Sun Kick, as well as on let's see where to go. Renewing Mist. So Renewing Mist is a 9-second recharge, but it does also mean that on Rising Sun Kick, which is right here, Rising Sun Kick, as you can see, is a 9.6 second cooldown. It's in green in this tooltip, which means it is a hasted cooldown. So it helps with Rising Sun Kick cooldown. Obviously, it helps with cast times. See, my Vivify sits at around 1.3 seconds right now, based off of that. And then it also helps with things like enveloping miscast time, Sheelan's gift cast times, things like that. Haste is just good. All right, so let's talk about your consumables. So we're going to look at everything from your enchants to your potions, your food, things like that. So enchants, I've got most of what you want to get here. Regenerative Leech is generally going to be best because Leech does impact your healing. So you're going to want Leech on your cloak and your bracers. Waking Stats is going to be the best for your chest piece here. On the belt, you do want to get a shadowed belt clasp if they're not too expensive. My server, they're still like 33k though, so it's not really worth 150 stamina. But if you got money to blow, or you have the materials, or you can make it yourself, go ahead and put one. For your leggings, you want the temporal spell thread because it gives the intellect and the plus 5% mana. So anytime you can deepen your mana pool, the better off you're going to be. I tend to prefer Watcher's Loam for Mistweaver and for Monk in general, although you can do Planesrunner's Breeze if you'd like. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's just whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Watcher's Loam does give a little bit more stamina, which means more HP, which means better able to survive things. And then for your rings, you're want to go grab haste on each, haste 82. Now there might come a point where, depending on how much haste you have, where crit might be useful on these rings, but you have to get to a pretty decent haste number. I think the number's something like 35 to 40% before crit or verse start to become much more valuable out of this. As far as other consumables go, you're going to want to grab Vial of Tepid Versatility. Generally speaking, is the safe pick. Now in Mythic Plus, you can run Vial of Glacial Fury, which does sacrifice the defensive value that Tepid Versatility gives in order to gain a little bit more damage. If you're just looking generally safe picks, Tepid Versatility is going to be good. Feast, or these here, the Devilishly Delicious Eggs, or Deviously Deviled Eggs, sorry, because they give intellect, and that's going to be your main stat. It outpaces all of the secondary stat foods. And then you're going to want to use Howling Rune for your rune weapon of choice. Again, they might get to a point where eventually you use something like Buzzing Rune, but it's going to take quite a bit to get there. As far as potions go, of course, you want to grab your aerated mana potions. You can grab your potions of ultimate power if you feel comfortable with how your mana is going to sustain and you need maybe a little bit more damage output in a Mythic Plus dungeon or something like that. But typically aerated mana potions are going to be good, or the potions that put you to sleep. I don't remember the names off the top of the head. I haven't found like great case uses for them in Mythic dungeons or in Raid. So I just kind of go safe with the aerated mana potion. And because of the way Mana Tea functions for Mistweaver Monk, I actually don't think you necessarily need the ones that put you to sleep. Let's talk about Mana Tea real quick. So Mana Tea has been changed to where basically you gain up to 20 stacks. And then you can drink it, and based on how long you drink, you get a buff that basically reduces the mana cost of your spells by 50% for up to 20 seconds. And then you also gain... it talks about 3,000 mana. If you're at 20 stacks, that's 60,000 mana that you're recovering. It's definitely saved me times where if I get a chance to full channel a Mana Tea, I can go from like maybe 10 to like 35, 40% mana. It's a lot of mana, and so it does have some real use for it. And of course, you can cast it while moving as well. So because of this mechanic actually restoring a lot of mana, I think you can safely go with the aerated mana potion and not have to put yourself in a position where you are immobile while you're channeling in your potions themselves. And then of course you want mage food, or you can go grab Azure Leywine, which you grab out of the Roasted Ram or any of the inns in Valdrakken. Of course, you see I need to refill mine. As far as gems go, this is actually I think a good way to look at it here with my Elemental Lariat. So what you want to do, generally you want to do Haste Mastery, and for your gem you want to do, I think it's Fierce, which is the primary stat, and the Haste. So that's the gem that you're going to want to take. And then you're also going to want to do on your helm the Incandescent one, which is the new one, which basically tethers you to someone. It doesn't actually tether, but basically connect, and both of you gain versatility. Very good enchant as soon as you can make it. It's probably going to be expensive for a while because the pattern drops out of the raid. So it's going to take some time to get it, but once you get it, it's going to be very valuable to put on your helm slot. But yeah, typically you're going to want to do all Keen Use Emeralds, the Haste Mat, or not, sorry, I have the wrong ones. It is Keen, I have the wrong ones here, so it's Haste Crit, not Haste Mastery. It's my fault here. I'll go replace these gems. But yeah, Haste Mastery or Haste Crit are the gems you're going to want with one of the Crafty Alexstraszites, and that's because you want to take advantage of the fact that you can get the air proc basically, which does give haste, whereas these, which are earth gems, they give verse, and then the fire gems, which is what the haste crit ones are, give you a crit bonus. So You just want to give yourself a chance to get both a haste and a crit bonus, which is why you do that. But then you want to run one primary stat gem, and then the rest are going to be haste crit gems, which of course can go on 1 in your helm, 3 in your neck, 1 on your bracers, and then 1 in each ring. So that's 1, 4, 5, 6, 7 gem slots potentially that you can get. So Elemental Lariat I've got now because it was just good recraft that I got. Speaking of crafting, for crafted slots, you're generally speaking going to want to craft Elemental Lariat. It is the best embellishment that you get, even at 3 gem sockets. So this is a craft that if you have a Lariat just laying around in your bags, probably going to be a good time to go ahead and recraft it, because it's going to be very, very valuable right off. And of course, you can customize the stats to being haste crit to guarantee you that best stat distribution. Other slots that you can look into for crafting items. For the next best one is a let me get the Wowhead information on it, but it is the Verdant Infusion. This is a new embellishment with this. Nope, that is. Let me just do it this way. This is a new embellishment. This patch, and basically what happens with Verdant Infusion is that you will, or Verdant Tether. So Verdant Tether basically, chance to tether you to a friendly ally, granting versatility to both based on the distance. So ideal world, you get like your tank or something because you're always going to be close to the tank. And then let me show you the incandescent one here. Let's quickly go up. And we'll grab Consumables. So the incandescent essence basically gives you a buff based on your specialization. From what we gathered so far, you apply brambles to a target on all your heals, and you gain additional healing if it's broken, and then it gives a little bit of absorb as well, or gain burst to the target if it doesn't break. So most part it's going to break if you're putting it on like your tank and stuff like that. So pretty decent helmet chant, does give a little bit of a bonus, but for the most part, it's going to be, like I said, it's probably going to be expensive, but if you can get it, get it. All right, so in terms of crafted slots, like we mentioned, bracers, boots, and belt are going to be your best crafted slots, depending on, if you get like good rings, but you're going to want to craft Lariat, definitely is going to be one of your embellishments, and then you want belt, boot, or bracers to be your other one. For Verdant Tether, you could even put it into your ring, and then a flavor pocket, of course, because its quality of life goes into any of those sockets as well. So what I would do with crafted gear is I would always just look at crafted gear as a way to flesh out what is potentially missing in your gear set. So for example, for me, I've got decent, here I'll get these like maxed out, but say I never get another set of boots, I can craft boots at like 476, for example, to flesh out the gear set, and then throw my Verdant Tether or my flavor pocket in there. All right. Last thing I want to do is I want to talk about trinkets. Now I'm going to use the Wowhead guide to kind of talk about this, because I think even though these do discuss like which trinkets are really, really good, I actually think that there's good value in a number of trinkets being available. Make sure, okay, my fat head's not covering them up. So I think really these ones here, these 6 are the ones that you want to target. I think overall, coagulated Genocide blood, I don't actually remember if healers can even get this. You have to get a caster to trade it to you. And then like Sea Star is a good just general stat stick one. Echoing Tearstone, if you really like on use effects, are pretty good. And then of course Bloom of Amir Drasil, which is got a strong haste on it. So all of these I think are really good trinkets. The biggest thing with like Bloom of Amir Drasil is that you don't have any sort of agency over when you want this effect to happen. Pip's Friendship Badge is just a good generic one. It doesn't give you haste, which does diminish it a little bit. I think if it gave haste, it would be by far the best trinket in the game. But because it doesn't give haste, it's not super valuable. Grab one if it's just like, for me, like you saw, I have a 437 rain song, so like this trinket is just going to be an upgrade purely based off of the primary stat that it gives me, even though the rest of the effects on it aren't that great. If you're targeting specific ones, I really think getting Echoing Tearstone and the Genisar Blood or Sea Star, I think all three of these trinkets are fantastic. Smoldering Seedling, which I do have, is decent to get as like a gateway if you're just needing trinket upgrades. But basically this is something that is like, it's good. Again, it was a big upgrade for me, so it was very much worth. But I wouldn't target this. Like, if no one else is taking it, take it if it's a decent trinket upgrade. But I think if you have one of these three up here at the top, you shouldn't be targeting any other trinkets, basically. So yes, it means that you're going to be grinding these dungeons out quite a bit, but I think that that's okay. All right. So that's the Mistweaver raid guide. Mistweaver Monk, I think, is right now the most popular it has been in quite a long time. We've seen it being played in world first comps. Both Echo and Liquid both had it in their top world kills. I think Method is running one now, as is groups like Instant Dollars and a couple of other guilds that are competing for top 5 in the world right now. Mistweaver Monk got quite a bit of changes coming into this patch, and it's paid off. I think the spec is incredibly fun to play right now. I think you should absolutely give it a shot if you are interested in healing. Like I said, it seems like it's got a lot going on, but its core premise is actually very straightforward. And then as you learn and figure out that core premise, adding on these layers and layers that you can do and figuring out the playstyle that's going to work best for you makes the spec just really fun. And then if you get bored playing one style of play, you can like jump into a raid and play 2 different styles of play. So you get these really nice variations in how the spec plays, so that you don't end up getting bored with it, really. Whereas, like, I know for a while, like, Holy Priest was like one style of play, and it's like Flash Concentration Days, and it was just the same build across everything. You know, and while there generally are builds that are going to be the best, Mistweaver is in a really good position in that both the Ancient Teachings and the Clouded Focus builds and raids are pretty good. There is a little bit of limited talent diversity in Mythic Plus right now, because it's basically just this build or bust. But the playstyle itself is kind of is fun and interesting enough, because you get that damage to healing conversion. You have good periods where you kind of do just pure healing, where you're only throwing in a Rising Sun Kick basically to extend your HOTS. And then you have these big burst healing moments with things like a fully stacked Sheelan's Gift. You have good GG windows. And then you can also bring in things like Paralysis. You have an Interrupt, you have Leg Sweep, you have Ring of Peace. So there's some good utility that you can use in the spec. It's not to the same level that like Shaman or Paladin bring to the table, but still pretty good overall. So I think if you're looking for a healer to play, I think Mistweaver is a great entry point as well, for those of you that are looking to test it out. If you're a monk player, maybe you play Brewmaster or Windwalker, I would highly suggest that you go in and you do a really strong go at Mistweaver Monk. I think you might find yourself enjoying it beyond the normal stresses of healing. So, but that's the end of the video here. If you stayed with me for 38 minutes, I truly appreciate it. I know these guides are quite long, but I want to make sure that we cover things in fairly depth, and I do tend to ramble, and I apologize for that. Till the next video, I hope you stay safe, I hope you have fun, you keep on gaming, and we'll see you next time.